Hello, everyone. My name is Yvonne. I'm with JK Lifestyles with Yvonne. Today, we're being joined with Avrum Weiss, Mr. J, and Koya. One of the things that I wanted to invite Mr. Weiss on is because he's talking about fears that men have. Personally, I don't see how they have them, but I'm not a man. That's why I want him to come on and explain to us.
You're not alone. Most women look at me like I'm crazy when I talk about this.
Mhm. So tell me, what are they afraid of?
Um, well, let's start with your not believing it because I think that's relevant. My experience is when I talk to men about this, the first response I get is I get about a 30 to 60-second kind of bowing up defensive, like I'm not afraid of a woman. And then it never takes more than a minute or two before almost every man I've ever talked to says, let's talk more about that. That's interesting. So they get it pretty quickly. But women are often pretty skeptical for this, I assume, the same reasons that you are. And that is because men are in such a dominant position in the world in terms of power and privilege, physically, what would they have to, as you say, what would they have to be scared of? But that's because you're looking at the external world. You're not looking at the internal world of intimate relationships.
Mm,
And that's where I'm talking about men's fears. Men are not afraid of you at work. Well, somewhat more and more as women get more and more power at work. But
mhm.
primarily what I'm talking about are the ways in which men are afraid of women in their intimate relationships,
How emotionally or physically?
emotionally.
Okay.
Mhm.
You think
So
that, go ahead,
I'm
Koya.
sorry. No, I'm sorry because my mind is sorry. Is are we thinking about the how I would speak for myself? I would really like for a man to be vulnerable, so emotionally vulnerable. What the world says, hey, you need to show up and be A, B, C, and D, and to
Yes.
be vulnerable. Okay, yeah, I can say one of the sexiest things I've ever seen was the man cry because I felt like, oh, he let down his shield, his armor, just to be open. Yeah.
So that's a really interesting thing you're talking about now. I'm glad you
Mhm.
brought that up.
Mhm.
So I'm delighted to hear you feel that way. A lot of men would be happy to hear you feel that way, but a lot of women don't feel that way. A lot of women think they should feel that way.
Mhm.
But
Let's say,
if you take a trip to your neighborhood grocery store and you check out the paperbacks, you know, the paperbacks at the checkout line where they have the
Mhm.
women's romance books.
Yeah.
mhm.
What is the plot of those books in a summary? What happens in those books?
I think the man comes in and sweeps the woman off her feet.
Yeah.
He
He
thinks
She
she's
moves her.
says,
gold.
He moves her. Yeah.
exactly. She says, no, no, oh, yes. So it's coercion. It's the opposite of vulnerability. And so it's a conundrum for men and women because emotionally, women want to feel the way that you're talking about. But physically and sexually, a lot of women's erotica is about being taken, is about men being dominant and controlling and forceful. So you can imagine men's confusion about that. Like, which am I supposed to be? Because unfortunately, many times in relationships, in intimate relations, when men are more intimate, are more vulnerable, it doesn't always go well in intimate. Sometimes women are unsettled or anxious about men being less than firm and controlling and in charge. That, they grew up with a dad who kind of ran things and protected her, and so that's their template for a man.
Mm.
And when men become more vulnerable, it's sometimes hard for both people in the couple to make that adjustment.
Mr. J, you counsel people, right? You counsel couples. Do you find that in your experience?
I'm going to tell you something. I think, from my perspective, uh, it men live in a I mean, both males and female live in a challenging society today. I think since we're talking about men, one of the challenges is, like Koya, you were saying, I like a man to be vulnerable. And I think from what I understand, vulnerability is very attractive. Weakness is not. And I think sometimes men have this misunderstanding of when and how and where to show the two. We live in a society where women want a strong man, absolutely, but yet we want a sensitive man. And it's so I think, one of the challenges for men is, at when is the right time to show up as, who we need to show up as. So it's interesting because I have been doing this for a while, and it was just like last week I was on my first all men's podcast, and now we're talking about this. So it's like, man, it's like, are we changing social structures or something, or what's going on in the world? But one of the things that I said in the last podcast I was on was, not only listen, ever since childhood, I mean, I think little boys are told, suck it up, man it up, be strong. I have a son and I have a daughter, and I have to be very mindful that I'm not having my son always bringing the groceries, always making sure that, he's doing the physical stuff. I want to make sure that both of my children are sharing in that responsibility. I will say this also: when my son starts to feel emotional or any type of sensitivity or whatever, I will tell him, man up. The difference is when I say man up, that means honor your emotions and feelings. If you feel you need to cry, man up and cry. Because I don't ever want to put it out there, man up, meaning, you don't have to honor your emotions, honor your feelings, what have you. But I think we do live in a day and age where the social structures and the tides are changing, and men are really trying to find this balance a lot. Certainly, there's a history of it being in the work field where we have to be strong. But historically speaking, if you go back even before then, what makes us strong is having a family to support us, to back us, to give us a reason to be strong so we can protect and support those that we love and so forth. So very interesting conversation nonetheless.
Maybe this doesn't have anything to do with it, but you talk when you say that men need family, something, a reason. What about some of the people that actively try not to have that responsibility or make that commitment because it's easier? Maybe they figure I'm being strong because I'm avoiding responsibility. I'm resisting being connected to one person because, I'm going to be strong and I'm going to be out here thinking only about myself.
Yeah, well, let me just say this, and then I'll let other people talk because I don't want to dominate the conversation. I'm not going to say every person, every man needs a family. That didn't come across correctly. I do,
even, not just a family, but someone that they can connect to or commit to.
Yeah,
take responsibility toward.
Yeah, I believe we are designed, all creatures, I believe human beings are designed for this companionship. And I think once we are in this role, this is just my own thoughts. Once we are in this companionship role, that's when we can effectively apply what we know best to do to the best of our ability. Which is, if you go back to, like, say, hunter-gatherer days, women have their roles, men have their roles. Now, I completely get we live in a society nowadays where a lot of that's changing, and I'm completely for that and respect that. But I think what we are designed for interaction, companionship, connection. So that's kind of what
one of the things, say when men are in an argument, say they're arguing with someone, and then instead of talking it out, get an understanding, they withdraw. Like, how is that helping the situation? I don't know, but you know, they withdraw, walk away rather than engage to the end to resolve it.
Well, it's not designed to help the situation. It doesn't help the situation because it's not designed to help the situation. It's designed to protect the man from the flood of emotions that he's experiencing. So the profound misunderstanding about that is that in most of the psychological literature, that withdrawal is portrayed as a control mechanism. And I don't think that's what men are about in that experience. I don't think it's about trying to control women. I think it's about trying to control themselves because emotions are contagious. If I start talking about how anxious I am, the three of you are going to start feeling anxious, particularly if we were in the same room together. That's just how it works. So when women get more emotional and men are less comfortable with their emotions, men start getting more emotional than they're comfortable with. So they start doing everything they can to lower the emotional temperature in the room. So this is where you hear men in relationships saying, criticizing women for being too emotional, just be rational, don't exaggerate, and withdrawing is another way of trying to lower the emotional temperature in the room so that they don't feel so uncomfortable.
Where were you 20 years ago? This, I had my, that, it just makes so much sense. As you're speaking, I'm sorry to inject, I'm just thinking about,
Yeah.
I grew up with all guys, just thinking about all these different things. It just makes all this, okay.
Well, no, I like what you're saying because it's
Yeah.
interesting because there's Freud actually wrote about this 150 years ago. But what
Okay.
tends to happen in my field is we sort of, like Freud wrote a lot about trauma. And then we forgot about that for about 100 years. And then we got interested in trauma again. This is another subject where nothing that I'm saying is new. And the only way that I came to understand it is I took the care and the time to really listen to men when they're talking. And if you listen to men, what they mostly talk about in private situations when there are not women around, they mostly talk about a long list of complaints about their relationships. And if you ask them, well, if you talk to your girlfriend, your wife, your partner about this, oftentimes what they'll look at you like you're crazy. Like, no, I'm not talking to her about it. Like, it's the farthest thing that and you realize they're terrified to talk with her about it. So it's right there to be seen. And once you have this idea, now when you leave this conversation, I'm sorry to tell you, but you're going to see it everywhere. Every time you're around men, you're going to see the ways in which they're afraid. It's like once you get it, you can't unsee it.
Is that what
And
they discussed?
one
Is
of
that
the
what they
things that I
discussed?
find is, you know, men are pretty linear in their thinking. I have a rubber band ball, and I say all the time, this is like a women's brain. It's like, well, if you did this, you didn't tell your mother back in 1950. And last Thursday, when we were having lasagna for the men are very linear. And so I think when we talk about fear, I think one of the things that men think about, I mean, I'm just going to be bottom line, is okay, how intense is this going to get, and how many days without sex am I going to go if this gets too heated? And we're very linear. So then we retract and go into, Yvonne, what you say is withdrawal.
You know, I was just thinking about something. I have two sons, and one of them, I know, like, say, for instance, if he wants to do a certain thing, but from my experience, having lived longer than him, I don't think it's a good idea his way. So I'll put forth another way. So he'll say, well, mom, I really don't want to whatever, but I know it's the best way. So he got to the point, you know what he'll say? Okay, mom. And I got to the point I said, I know you're not going to do it, but I just wonder if that's his way of dealing with a difficulty. I told you what I'm going to do. You don't want to accept it. Okay, just to shut you up.
How
I'll
old is
agree,
he?
but 29.
Oh, so he's grown. Okay. Well, I would say if he's grown, I'd say at 29, okay, mom is a pretty reasonable response. Like, Like it's my business, it's my life, Mom. Thanks for the input. Now it's my call.
Yeah, but I wonder if, like, say, if that was his wife, would it be, well, I don't want to upset her. I want to make sure that I get what I want. You know, I don't want to do without anything that I'm normally getting. So I'll agree with her, or I'll just shut down. Is that why they shut down?
Yeah,
So they could just,
I think you're making a really important point. Again, I'm obsessed with bookstores here.
thank
But
you, Mr. J.
if you go if you go to a bookstore, you will find one of the largest shelves, one of the largest collections are books written for women about men. There are hundreds of books, oddly, mostly written by women. Now, if I wanted to understand football, I think I'd read a book written by somebody who played football. I don't think I'd read a book about football, but so I don't understand why women think they're going to learn about men reading books written by women. But
Mm,
clearly, women are very confused by men and really want to understand. So men often don't feel so understood by women. So when women offer advice to men, men often feel like, yeah, you don't get me. Like,
mm.
thanks, I know you're trying, but I don't think you really hear me or understand me. And I think they have a point because I see all those books and I get invitations from women to come on podcasts to talk about men by women. And so it seems to me that there's a problem here, that men are largely opaque to women.
Well,
So I'm sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Wait, so in your expertise, a man, I mean, innately feels this way that he came to be vulnerable to a woman. He sits with you or Mr. J and is this revelation, or I'm not gonna say revelation, but he's identifying, oh, I feel this way because I'm gonna use the word I don't feel safe. I hope you don't hear my dog. He's in his guard dog duty. Um, do you see a shift where he now feels more open if he feels safe? A shift in, oh, I actually now can express to say, hey, ABCD, or so I just stop there. Could you identify that there a shift may now happen after this revelation?
Well, I think this goes to something Mr. J said a little while ago, which is, of course, I think one of the things women misunderstand about men is it seems to you as if we don't want connection and you do. And that's not true. So the answer to your question is yes, of course, because men want connection as much as women do. They're just more hidden about it. They're less upfront about it. And so when the conditions are there for them to be more vulnerable and they're with a woman who finds that sexy, you bet your butt they're going to be more vulnerable because they want the same thing you do. Because as Mr. J says, it's a universal human experience.
And if a guy can get vulnerable and feel safe,
I
he's
know.
going to open up like a
Mm.
flower turns to the
Yeah,
sun.
yeah.
Give me more, give me more, give me more. I feel safe. I'm swallowing that up.
So I run therapy groups for men, just men.
I
And
love
I,
that.
sorry,
I said I love that because I don't hear a lot. I often
it's
think I
happening
say
more and
too,
more.
yeah, it's I don't hear it's just who do the men have? I often think that who does the leader go to? And not that women are leaders, but I think about the men who I know in my life who
Yeah.
are leaders. Like who do you go to? But it comes back to feeling vulnerable to express. So
So as a sidebar in response to what you just said, um, one of the chapters in my book that I'm happiest about is a chapter for men to answer that question, which is how do you find other men to talk to? And so it's a
mm,
whole chapter about how to find other men, how to set up a group of time for people to get together, how to structure the conversation so that men. So what I was starting to say was that in these therapy groups, and I've been running groups for over 50 years, and mostly I've run until the last 15 years or so, I've run mostly mixed groups, men and women together. And in those groups, men are less emotionally open and vulnerable than the women. But a funny thing happens when you run a group with just men. They open up, as Mr. J said, they open up like a flower. So in
mm,
my groups with all men, men look each other in the eye routinely and say, I love you. You're important to you. This group is important to me. I know it's not how you
It
think
seems
about
like a
men.
fable. A myth.
It's
It is.
not. It's because you don't know what men are like when you're not there.
Yeah,
So,
clearly. But
You,
I love
you,
to hear that. Okay, I'm sorry.
me
Go
you know
ahead.
too.
what? You know what I'm just thinking? I mean, this is very high level and it's very useful. But what I think about is if I meet someone and there's a male, how do I know how to approach them? How do I know what to say to them? How do I know how to view them?
Great
That's what
question.
basically. I mean, I know they think differently, but
Well, how do you approach someone if you know they're scared? What do you
Speak to
do
this.
differently if you're talking to somebody and you know they're scared?
I don't think they're that scared.
Really
Haven't convinced you yet, huh?
Yeah.
You know why I think, you know what I think? I think to a certain extent, they may have a little hesitancy in how they approach a woman or even another man, but mainly a woman. They probably they probably wonder what to say. But I feel like a lot of them have their own agendas and they just look to see how they can do things to follow their own agenda. That's how I think. I'm not
Okay, I
like
appreciate
I
you being
said.
honest.
You want to cry here? Go ahead and cry. And
So you
I,
don't think very highly of men.
mm, some,
Well, you're describing men as basically manipulative.
yeah, I feel
Okay.
that way.
So
I feel that people are, but I feel like men really are.
I hear you.
I think they take advantage, and I think that say for instance, if I was the type to say, I like a man to expose himself, they may overexpose just so they can manipulate
I understand.
to do what they want. So I'm just not that
So consider the possibility that
yeah.
all of the bad behavior you've experienced from men
Hmm.
is not about them trying to control you, but about them being scared. So I'm not denying your experience.
What are they scared of?
All right, may I tell you a story?
Hmm.
Okay. In the 60s or 70s, there was a social psych experiment called the still face experiment. STILL, still. What they did is they did a split screen, moms, infants. They're looking at each other, but you're looking at it in a split screen. And they're playing. These are little babies, so they don't talk yet. And you can see there's a dialogue going on. The baby tries out a cute face and the mom smiles and the baby's like, that worked. That made mom happy. So they're learning each other back and forth without words, right? Then the mom is instructed to turn away and turn back with a still face. Not angry, not critical, just not responsive. What do you think happens to the babies?
They probably don't know how to act. They probably don't know whether to smile, whether to
Yeah.
cry, whether to frown.
You
Yeah.
got it, but it's 10 times worse. Within a minute, all the babies lose it.
Mm.
So much so that some of them lost bowel and bladder control and couldn't sit upright anymore, just from their mothers not responding to them, not
Mm.
yelling at them, not criticizing them, not blaming them, not hitting them, nothing but not responding. These children were undone. For men, intimate relationships with women are that way. When men need women's approval, validation, love, and when they don't get it, they are no different than the babies in that study. They lose it. They fall apart. Why is it when heterosexual couples break up, who starts dating first? Men or women?
Men.
Always.
Mm.
Why is that? If men talk all the time about, I don't need women, how come they start dating first? How
You
come they
know,
get remarried first?
something I noticed that too because when I was younger, my godfather, his wife died, and he was saying that women were approaching him and everything, and he didn't really, he took his time before he started dating again. He said a lot of men don't like to be by themselves, so they'll, jump into a relationship really quickly. So
Because
I
they're just
guess,
like the babies in that study.
Mm.
And
mm,
that's what the fears are. That's what they look like. So I had a guy tell me once that when he came home at the end of the day at work, he could tell when he walked in the door whether or not his wife was upset with him before he saw her.
Mm.
Before he ever saw her, he could feel it in the air.
Mm.
Okay?
Mm.
So
Mm.
how focused do you have to be on your wife's approval if you can feel it in the air?
well, you made your point. I kind of get it.
You're a tough sell.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would say to you is that I've spoken with thousands of men about this,
Mm.
Mhm.
and I'm still waiting to first meet my first straight white man who doesn't have some fear of women.
Mm.
What do you
Well,
think, Mr. Jay? Does this make sense to you?
Oh yeah. This makes 100% sense to me. I think it was good that you broke down exactly what fear is, because I think that's what a little confusion was at the beginning. I think,
Hmm.
when we hear of fear, we assume it's topical fear,
Right.
when fear, could be fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of, what have you. And Yvonne, with all the love in my heart, I'm gonna say I think that one, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I think one of the frustrations I'm hearing when you talk
mhm.
is I have a disdain towards certain men because I let them take my power away.
Mm.
And I
That's
think
true.
you paint a
Mm.
broad brush with men, and Lord knows I get it. No judgment here.
Mm.
But I hate that I hate that anyone was allowed to take your power away. And
Mm.
Koya, I just want to say you are sitting up like all kinds of deer in the headlights interested. Why
Oh,
is this
it's
so
just so
interesting to you?
good. Oh, I was like, this is so, I was like, this is so good for me. And it's eye opening, and I was thinking the same about Yvonne, and I was similar from my trauma where I didn't trust men, but just through therapy, I just realized there's so many different layers, so I had to build that back, and I'm very touchy feely. My love language is definitely touch. So part of my healing was to if I saw you guys, I'm a hug you. That's just innately helped me to build back my trust, not only in men and human beings. Let me be very clear. But I learned a thing that at least most of the men in my life, their love language is of service. And so when I would
Yes, it is.
hug, it was kind of disarming. And so now I'm more intentional because I tell some of my good girlfriends, I'm like, hey, but your man needs to be adored in church too. And there's a power, and I just see a difference with the brothers and other men in my life when they're touched and held, and I really want to hear what's happening in your heart. It just creates a different energy. And maybe because I'm not their girlfriend or their partner, I'm gonna get a different energy too. But I even see a different response versus just being rigid. It's this open and fluidity of emotion. But
Absolutely.
thank you. I am. I feel like I'm in school. I'm like, tell me more.
Yeah.
I'm just soaking it out. It's so good.
I also want to say something about why it's important to talk about this because there's a lot written that you may have seen. There's a national bestseller by Richard Reeves, the title of which just left my mind, Boys and Men or something like that. Anyway, he compiled all the data about how men are doing now. And basically, in every area of life, men are doing horribly and it's getting worse all the time. So men, first of all, we die 7 years before you do. We are earning less, you're earning more. We're going to school less, you're going to school more. We are not as happy as you are. We are not as healthy as you are. All these ways in which men commit suicide more often, they're incarcerated more often, they commit more violent crimes. There are all these ways you can see that the world is not working for men the way it used to. and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to live yet. Men are trying to figure out how to live in a peer relationship with women as opposed to a hierarchical relationship with women. Some men are making the adjustment, are lucky enough to meet a woman like you who says, I'm attracted to you when you cry. Other men are having a harder time with that adjustment and they're falling farther and farther behind in the world.
And would you say that heterosexual men are probably having the more difficult time? Because that's what I'm finding.
I think that makes sense to say. I mean, I think gay men have a whole other set of problems, and I don't know how to
Certainly.
compare more or less, but I think we didn't used to think straight men had any problems because they had all the advantages. But I think it's more and more clear now that straight men are not doing well at all. And mostly what we are just beginning to understand two things. One is how much pain straight men are
I was going to ask you that.
in. Okay, what do you want to ask?
I was going to ask, do you feel that, and I'm sorry to interject, I'm
No,
sorry.
that's right.
Do you feel that the men that you both have worked with, that they're heartbroken?
That's a great
Not,
word.
not
Yes.
justifying their actions, but that they're heartbroken.
Absolutely. And if you will indulge me, I'll tell you another story.
Sure.
Okay.
In most
Quickly,
families,
though.
in
Quickly.
most heterosexual families, kids grow up closer to their moms. Moms do the bulk of the emotional caretaking. It's changing, but still that way. Dads tend to come into the picture. I had family visiting here this weekend, and she told me they have young children. And she was telling me that her father is now just getting interested in her children because they're old enough to do stuff with him. But before that, he didn't really know what to do with them. So dads tend to come into the picture when kids get a little older, like grade school. And at that point, kids, boys, are faced with a terrible, terrible choice. Because dads come along and they say, listen, son, you can be a man like me and have access to the world of power and privilege like I do. But to be a man in this culture means to not be feminine. We don't have a definition of masculinity. We just have a not feminine. Being masculine means don't do anything that looks feminine. Unfortunately, in this culture, femininity includes warmth, closeness, intimacy, tenderness, vulnerability, all the things you find attractive. And then we create a forced choice for young boys. You go over here with dad and be a man, which means you have to give up your close friends, you have to give up being crying and all that. You have to give that up to have the power and the privilege, or you can stay and have those things. So it's a horrible wound that men carry with them for the rest of their lives. Boys have friendships with other boys that are as close as girls' friendships with other girls until this point in life, in which case they start turning their backs on their friends and giving up their close men. And you talk to men now who are adults and you say, do you have any close friends? Oh, no. I've got buddies. I've got guys I go to the bar with. But I said, do you have a friend you could talk to? Oh, my God, no. So imagine your life with no friends to talk to. And I'm just going to make a sexist assumption and assume that as women, you have friends to talk to. Most men don't. Imagine what your life would be like if you had nobody to talk to. Not a nice thought, huh?
No, it's quite.
And I'll just piggyback
Like,
on that. You know, there's a lot of groups out there, lots of men groups from Fatherly and Daddy-O and all these, you know, men's groups, specifically more towards being dads, but even just men in general. And I will say, unfortunately, not only is there not as many resources for community support groups for men as there are for females, but unfortunately, a lot of these men groups necessarily aren't as populated or has the population or the support that other women do. And I just want to say another thing too, Koya, even on just a fundamental level, it must be interesting because it sounds to me like when you give a hug, there's energy and I'm not into all this energy work, but no offense if anybody else is, but you probably get a lot of information when you get a hug from someone, a lot of information from them.
it's a download. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just interesting because again, just because of the times I think we're living in, I think the average straight guy might be like, okay, I don't want to give any mixed messages. I don't want to inappropriately come in and hug and touch on something I shouldn't be. If I'm dating somebody, am I going to hear it when on the way home? Why did you hug her or whatever? So we got all kinds of other messages going on in our head too when we're trying to hug. So what you might perceive as a cold hug